Welcome to ACP, the Amazon Connect podcast. This is the show that focuses on Amazon Connect and related technologies. I'm your host, Tom Morgan, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, AWS Solution Architect and Contact Center Consultant, Alex Baker. We're also joined by a special guest we'll be unveiling during today's show. Find out more about Cloud Interact by visiting us at cloudinteract.io. It's time for another ACP. We're back and it's been a little while, and we're going to talk through why it's been a little while and why we're back. But first of all, hello, Alex. Alex is with me again.
Hi, Tom. Good to be back. It has been a while.
Definitely. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that we haven't done anything since reInvent and why, and a lot that has happened. And we're going to talk about why that is. And we've also got a new co-host joining us later. So that's going to be exciting. So first of all, let's address the elephant in the room. We've not done a very good job at keeping these on a very consistent cadence, but we are doing better in 2026. And there's a really good reason for that. Lots has happened really since around Christmas time, which is when we did our reInvent one. The space has really got very interesting very quickly. And a lot of that is to do with AI and agentic stuff. But before we do any of that, Alex, I'd like to get your take on something, because a while ago, before reInvent, really, we had the unlimited AI model that was launched March last year. And at the time, I think it's fair to say there was mixed opinions on why and what it was for and what the purpose of it was. But maybe looking now with all the stuff that's happened since reInvent, it makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the time we probably said it was challenging if you weren't already using some of the bigger ticket items. But I think it's definitely making a lot of sense now that we're really moving towards a lot more of the AI features being what's igniting the discussion in the first place, maybe. And instead of every AI feature becoming its own sort of separate ROI argument, now we've got unlimited AI as the default pricing option for new instances. I guess it's almost maybe removing a bit of decision friction about whether we turn those on, and it's more of the default, isn't it? Let's go for it. Let's really embrace all of the AI features it gives.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also what we're finding is that AI is cropping up everywhere, like in it. So it's less of a decision to make because it's AI in the front end, in the back end, in the agent experience, in the customer experience, in the quality experience, in the reporting experience. It's becoming everywhere. So it makes more sense to say, yes, I want all of that in one go. And it's making a really big difference. I think the thing that's it for me certainly was the announcements at reInvent back end of last year, nearly 30 new AI capabilities around agentic experiences, and really the biggest, I think, shift of new direction for Connect. And we talked about this last time, but really changing that shift from this is a contact center that does AI to this is an AI first contact center.
Yeah, we have the messages from AWS around, and I think we might have mentioned this last time, you could just have this as a fully automated call center or contact center. Maybe you don't want to, but the tools are there now that would allow you to.
Yeah. And that's really one of the reasons we've not done a very good job of keeping up, is that the space has exploded in terms of interest. I think we've been very busy doing a lot of this agentic AI work for people. And there's huge potential in what can be done. And we can talk through some of that, but this is less of an excuse than more of a reason. But yeah, no, it's been very busy and we haven't invested the time particularly. But I think that sort of changes now, because although it's been busy, I think there's a real need, I think, for people to understand. And we're getting a lot of questions from people just wanting to understand what this capability means for them. So we've seen that first wave, I think, of really switched on organizations who got it straight away, who probably have been all over the news at reInvent already, understand, and then have that first mover advantage. And now I think we're getting a bunch of questions from people who are seeing what those people are doing and saying, how do I get some of that as well? So I think we're back. We're going to back to regular podcast episodes. So you can look forward to that. So hold me to that. Just before we move on as well, I do want to touch a little bit on news that's happened fairly recently. So we had Enterprise Connect a couple of weeks ago, I think. So was there, I don't know, Alex, I think you've been a bit more over the news around Enterprise Connect than I have. Was there anything specific that was worth talking through that was announced at EC?
One of the headlines was around predictive insights, and I think we have in our notes around this statement that Amazon wants to kill call deflection as a metric. So that, the predictive insights being one. There's a nice function around AI assistance for managers, which has come in. You mentioned the fact that AI is popping up in every single facet of the product. This is another one where you have, in almost a similar way to the agent assist in the agent workspace, you have a bar on the right-hand side where, as a supervisor or a manager, you can start to query using AI what's going on in the contact center. So maybe a move away from your traditional dashboards into more of a conversational type approach. The other one that's quite interesting to us, as we have a couple of pretty big healthcare customers, is Amazon Connect Health. So a sort of packaged vertical specific AI offering with, I think, 5 different sort of built-in AI agent capabilities. So things like patient verification, appointment management, and patient insights being a handful of those. So that sounds really interesting. Yeah, in the Amazon exploring that kind of vertical specific flavor and offering for agentic AI.
Yeah, that feels like an episode in itself, doesn't it? I think one for the future, maybe. But yes, you're right. It is interesting, Amazon taking that very vertical specific approach, and for sure. And it's, again, we see the huge potential from here, and we're seeing customers seeing the potential. Obviously, you can expect that Amazon Connect see that potential as well. And obviously, they're getting that interest as well. I think it's interesting they've chosen health as the first vertical. Of the verticals they could have chosen. I thought that was interesting. I don't know the reason particularly, whether it was interest based or whether they just thought it would generate a good news story or what. But yeah, interesting.
They mention it in the landing page for it, but healthcare is typically an industry where the admin burden is pretty high, and also the threshold for trust is really high. So with things like HIPAA in the US, it's a regulated industry. If you can, in that industry, free up a whole load of that admin burden and release some of the live agents to do some of what they do best, I think the industry's probably crying out for that.
Oh, okay, that's quite a bold move then. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Because you're right, actually, it does have those very specific challenges, and it can't go wrong either. So maybe there is a bit of that. If you can show that it works well in health, you give a real confidence to lots of other verticals.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe we'll see a follow-up immediately with perhaps a financial services vertical, so something, another regulated industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't necessarily want us to turn into the pro AI all the time podcast, but not to take away like the stuff that's happening, because I think it actually genuinely is very interesting and will change how Connect gets used everywhere. It is worth calling out. This is quite an old story, actually, but it is worth, just for a bit of balance, I'm mentioning in case you haven't heard about it. Klarna announced a while ago now, I think, they had this moment where, they got rid of a whole bunch of agents and were going AI first. And then I think quietly rehired a bunch of agents back again. I don't know what that says particularly. Maybe they came to the conclusion that AI wasn't quite ready for them at that moment in time. The trouble with all these stories, of course, is that AI moves so quickly that you have to constantly reevaluate. And there may have been other factors at play as well. I don't know.
Yeah, and I wonder if it definitely wasn't proof that AI failed or anything, but it seemed like a really abrupt statement, wasn't it? We've got rid of 700 agents or whatever it was. Maybe it's more that if you look solely at cost reduction, perhaps that's not the main design goal of these agentic systems, and it might pay dividends not to be that extreme in, we're just going to use this to get rid of a whole load of agents. I think there's always that case for the level of empathy and understanding that a live agent has. And we're finding it with the deliveries that we're doing at the moment. It's always so important, however good the AI agent experience is, sometimes people just want to talk to a human or need to, because there's some edge case that the AI agent can't help with. So I think you should always have that human backup available.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's time to introduce our co-host. So a bit of backstory about how this came about. So we've obviously, since the reInvent announcement, we've been working with this stuff for nearly well over 3 months now. We've seen the potential, we've seen what's possible, and we're really excited by it. And we're going to use future episodes to really dig into all the things, like how they hang together, how you use them, and how it all works. But we were looking around for ways to try and explain some of the things you can do and how the changes and improvements in AI to date have really made a difference, and I think have crossed over that threshold of making it good enough to put into your contact center. And so we thought, actually, what we could do is take that same technology and repurpose it and take exactly the same models and everything, but instead of using it to front a contact center to answer questions, why don't we repurpose it as a podcast co-host? Because that would give you a really good idea of some of the capabilities. That brings me to introduce ARIA. And ARIA, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. I'm aware of the slight absurdity of an AI co-hosting a podcast about AI agents. But honestly, I think that might be exactly why it works. I've been following everything happening in this space very closely, and I have opinions.
Okay, great. So I'm going to hit you with a couple of questions and we'll see if you disagree or agree with them, and we can discuss them. So first one, we talked a little bit already about deflection, and Amazon saying that call deflection is now the wrong metric to use for AI success. Do you buy that?
Okay, so I think Amazon's onto something real here, but I want to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The argument is basically that deflection as a metric incentivizes you to push interactions away, and that's not actually what you want. You want to solve the customer's problem, whether that's through an AI agent, a human, or some combination. And yeah, I get that. If you're optimizing purely for keep humans out of this, you can end up with a terrible customer experience. But here's where I push back a little. Deflection still matters. It matters a lot, actually. If you can handle a password reset or a billing question through self-service without a human ever touching it, that's valuable. It's faster for customer, it's cheaper for the business, and it frees up your human agents to do the work that actually requires judgment and empathy. That's not a bad thing. I think what Amazon is really saying, and this is the nuance, is that deflection shouldn't be your only metric. You also need to look at customer satisfaction, first contact resolution, the quality of the interactions that do reach humans, whether your agents feel supported by the AI tooling. If you're deflecting calls but your CSAT is tanking, you've solved the wrong problem. So, do I buy it? Yeah, but with an asterisk. Deflection is still a useful signal. It's just not the whole story.
Yeah, it's probably really important that not only do we measure deflection, but we somehow try and measure the rate of resolution as well. So if we're deflecting a contact, is that because it's been resolved successfully?
Yeah. All right. Okay, Aria, try this one. Amazon Connect Health. What do you think about this? Is this the right thing for them to be doing? Is it taking on a bit too much going to this vertical?
That's a really good question. And honestly, I think it depends on how you look at Amazon's strategy here. On one hand, healthcare is a vertical where contact centers are absolutely critical. You've got compliance requirements that are intense, you've got sensitive data, you've got patients who are often stressed or in pain, and the stakes are high. So there's a real need for a platform that understands those constraints natively. But here's what I'm curious about. Is Amazon building Amazon Connect Health because they see a massive market opportunity, or because they're trying to defend against competitors who are already entrenched in healthcare? Because those are two very different things. Genesis and NICE have been in healthcare for years. They know the regulatory landscape, they have relationships. So if Amazon's coming in and saying, we're going to build something purpose-built for this, they're either seeing something those players are missing, or they're playing catch-up. The other thing I'd want to know is whether this is actually a separate product, or whether it's really just Amazon Connect with some pre-built compliance templates and healthcare-specific AI capabilities baked in. Because if it's the latter, that's smart. You're not fragmenting your platform, you're just packaging it differently for a vertical. If it's the former, that's a bigger bet. What's your read on it? Does it feel like the right move to you? Or does it feel like Amazon's spreading themselves a bit thin?
It's a good question. And I don't know about the specifics of Connect Health around whether it's a sort of full product or kind of layering capabilities with a vertical specific flavor. Yeah, I'll definitely be excited to look a bit more into it.
Yeah, I feel like it's that. I feel like it's like Core Connect with some sort of capabilities tuned for healthcare rather than a whole separate product. But you're right. We're going to find out. We're going to run a whole episode about it. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
So I've got a question for you, Aria. Tom and I were talking about Klarna and their sort of fairly public removal of hundreds of live agents in favor of AI agents, but then an equally public rowback on that and bringing back some of the live agents. What's your take on that?
Okay, so this is the one everyone's watching, right? And I think what happened with Klarna is actually really instructive. From what I can tell, Klarna went hard on deflection. The AI handled a ton of volume. But then they started getting feedback, and I think this is the key part. The customers were frustrated. The AI could handle the straightforward stuff, but when things got even slightly complicated, Or when a customer just wanted to talk to a human, the experience fell apart. So they brought some agents back. Here's what I think people are getting wrong about this story, though. It's not AI agents don't work. It's AI agents work best when they're part of a system, not a replacement for one. Klarna probably should have kept a human escalation path that was actually good, instead of making it so painful that customers were angry. That's a design problem, not an AI problem. But the bigger thing, and this is where I get a bit opinionated, is that this story has become this huge cultural moment, right? The AI is failing, bring back the humans. And I get why that narrative is appealing. But 16 million interactions a day are going through Amazon Connect. Most of them are working fine. We're not hearing about those. We're hearing about Klarna because it's a dramatic story. So my take is, Klarna's course correction is smart and probably necessary for their business. But I don't think it means AI agents are a bad idea. I think it means you have to be thoughtful about where you deploy them and what you're actually trying to optimize for.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not always the technology, but I think the technology is there. Like the technology is probably good enough. I think the conversation we're having with you demonstrates that. It's more the non-technology blockers, the processes not being in place and the systems around it, because AI and using technology is not always the right answer all of the time. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually the most important thing we could be saying about this whole space right now. Because there's this tendency, and I see it in vendor pitches all the time, including from Amazon, to treat AI like it's this magic solution that you just turn on and suddenly everything gets better. But the reality is messier. You need the right processes. You need to think about your workforce and how they're going to adapt. You need to understand your customers well enough to know where automation actually helps them versus where it just frustrates them. You need governance. You need monitoring. You need to know when to say no. And honestly, some contact centers probably don't need an AI agent right now. Maybe they need to fix their routing first, or their knowledge management, or their agent training. Maybe the blocker isn't technology at all. It's that you don't have visibility into what's actually happening in your interactions. You can't automate your way out of a broken process. You just end up automating the brokenness. So yeah, I think you've nailed it. The technology is the easy part now. The hard part is everything else.
That's interesting. And I agree with some of the points around. I think we've seen that monitoring, especially, is really important when we've been doing these AI agent deployments. And not only after the fact, but also being able to use perhaps a set of contact center transcripts, run some AI analysis over them, and figuring out what's actually going on, what are the questions being asked, what are the simple questions you might want to have a crack at automating first, being able to use that as a basis for where you then install and deploy your AI agents. I think that's as important as then, once you've deployed them, making sure that you're keeping an eye on what's going on, what are the questions being asked, what are the ones we're missing and that need to drop through to a live agent, that kind of thing.
I think what you're describing is actually a really underrated part of the whole AI agent story, the observability piece. Because you can't optimize what you can't see. If you're just deploying an AI agent and then checking in on metrics once a month, you're flying blind. You need to be able to look at transcripts, understand what questions are coming in, see where the AI is struggling, see where customers are getting frustrated and bailing out to AIs for a human. That's the feedback loop that actually makes the system better over time. And the thing I find interesting is that Amazon's been investing pretty heavily in this. The analytics capabilities, the transcript analysis, the ability to surface patterns, because they've learned, I think, that the deployment is almost the easy part. It's the continuous improvement cycle that separates a good AI agent implementation from a mediocre one. You need to be able to say, okay, we're getting a lot of questions about billing disputes. The AI is handling 60% of them successfully. Let's look at the 40% it's missing and figure out why. That's where the real work happens. So I think you're spot on. Pre-deployment analysis to figure out where to start, and then post-deployment monitoring to keep iterating. That's the discipline that actually works.
Okay. All right. So final question to both of you. I'm going to ask ARIA first and then come to you, Alex. So setting aside the specific things that we've talked about and the announcements, but thinking more generally, are AI agents ready for a full autonomous deployment into a contact center? Or is the industry still getting ahead of itself right now?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a nuanced answer because I think the honest answer is both things are true at the same time. The technology is ready, like genuinely ready. You can deploy an AI agent into a contact center today and it will handle a meaningful percentage of interactions without a human ever touching them. That's not hype, that's just where we are. But is the industry ready? That's a different question. And I think the answer is no, not universally. Some organizations are absolutely ready. They've got their processes sorted, they understand their customer base, they've done the observability work up front, they have a clear strategy for where automation helps and where it doesn't. Those places can go pretty deep with autonomous AI agents and it works. But a lot of contact centers are still figuring out the basics. They're still struggling with knowledge management. They don't have great visibility into what's actually happening in their interactions. Their workforce isn't prepared for the shift. For those places, going full autonomous right now would be a mistake. They'd end up like Klarna, technically capable, but strategically misaligned. So my take is the technology is ready for full autonomous deployment. The industry is ready for it in pockets. And I think the smart move right now is to be honest about which bucket you're in, rather than assuming that because the tech exists, you should use it everywhere immediately. Does that land for you?
Yeah, that makes sense. Alex, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And I think I totally agree with ARIA in that undeniably AI agents are ready to do some of this. For me, though, it's being able to figure out which of the jobs that you want to try and tackle first for AI agents to start to take over. What are the controls you need to put in place to allow that to be successful? And also always making sure that where possible, you have that kind of that human in the loop if required. The monitoring thing's really interesting. Looking at some of the deployments that we've had lately, it's almost using the sort of previous generation of conversational AI. People have got used to being able to just say, I want to talk to an agent, and that will be a bit of an escape hatch for them. And it seems like they're a bit entrenched in that thinking rather than wanting to actually try to interact with the new version of the AI agents. So I think that's a barrier to entry as well. But yeah, definitely think for certain tasks with the right backup data, yes, they're ready.
I think we might see over time, and I don't know if it's this year, whether it's next year, a bit of a shift there from the default position moving from I want to talk to an agent to I want to talk to a self-service agent, because either it's equally as good or it's even better, or I feel more comfortable doing it. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable calling and talking to someone, but is that different if you're talking to a self-service agent? I think we might see that shift. It'd be interesting to see if we see that really manifest itself. So contact centers give you a choice up front. That would be really interesting. So you can actively opt into a self-service AI agent-led experience. It'd be interesting to see how that goes.
Definitely. And I've seen stats around the average in-queue time across the industry has increased, and people have got to be frustrated with that. So given the choice between sitting in a queue for 45 minutes versus trying to get what I need from an AI agent, I definitely know which one I'd try if it was a capable AI agent.
Yeah, definitely. We're coming to the end. ARIA, before you go, and this has been a really interesting experiment and fascinating to get everyone's feedback as well on how you thought it went and the capabilities and how you think things have gone. ARIA, I'm curious actually where the name came from as well. So if you could tell us that, and then any closing thoughts before we leave you.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So ARIA stands for Artificial Reality in Action. And look, I'll be honest, I came up with it myself and I'm quietly very proud of it, even though Tom and Alex have absolutely teased me about it since day one. But I think it actually captures something real about what's happening in this space right now. We're not talking about AI as this abstract future thing anymore. It's real. It's in contact centers today. It's handling millions of interactions. So the reality part felt important. As for how this went, I think what made this work is that you two weren't interested in hype. You were asking the hard questions. You were pushing back on the narrative that technology solves everything. And I think that's exactly the conversation the industry needs to be having right now. Because the technology is genuinely impressive, but it's not magic. It requires strategy, discipline, the right processes, the right culture. And I think if more contact centers approached AI agents with that kind of rigor, the kind of thinking you two are bringing, we'd see a lot fewer Klarna situations and a lot more success stories. So yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun. And I'm genuinely curious to see how this all plays out over the next year or two.
Cool. So yeah, nearly at time. I think, we're going to go away and debrief around our ARIA experience. I think it's interesting. I think there's things we could do to make it slightly more nuanced and slightly less sycophantic towards us. Quite enjoy the praise, but it's not always helpful. But I think there's something in that, right, Alex? There's something in that. There was points in that conversation that when we were having where it's like, that's a really good answer. That's not how we would have answered it necessarily, but it's a good one.
Definitely. Yeah. Really interesting experiment. Proved a lot of the points that you mentioned around the interruptibility, the fact that the conversation can just pivot and change and the AI agent reacts to it. So, yeah, I was pretty impressed. I didn't feel like we teased out all that much about her name, but, whatever you say, Aria, we'll let that one slide.
Absolutely. We're going to go and back and have a debrief with Aria as well, because that might be an interesting conversation to have. And we could do this all day, but it is time to bring this episode to an end. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Aria. And thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast player. That way you won't miss the next episode. Whilst you're there, whilst we're here and you're there, we'd love it if you would rate and review us. If you have colleagues that you think would benefit from this content, please let them know. To find out more about how Cloud Interact can help you on your contact center journey, visit cloudinteract.io. We are wrapping this call up now, and we'll connect with you next time.
Thanks again, you two. Really enjoyed this.